Welcome to Mansplaining, a podcast about the interesting things you can discover if you just take the time to learn. My name is Joe, I'm your host for this week, and as always I'm joined by my college friend Mark. Together we'll explore what's on our minds and hopefully figure out a thing or two about a thing or two. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing well. I finally got an appointment for my first vaccine, so I get the first dose tomorrow morning, and I am excited about that.
That's fantastic. I get my second dose on Sunday morning, so we're taping this on a Friday afternoon, and in the next couple days we'll both get vaccinated.
Well, congratulations. You undoubtedly were running down the streets of New York licking every available surface, reveling in your new freedom.
Not quite yet, although my wife and I are venturing out to see live jazz tonight, and it's the first time we'll do anything like that in more than a year, so I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, I do miss the ability to congregate with others of our species.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get to the topic. This week's topic is deepfakes. And this is a subject that I've wanted to know more about ever since the word kind of entered the lexicon a few years ago. But I think what triggered my asking you about it for this episode is my exposure to this genealogy website called MyHeritage, which has this new feature on it called Deep Nostalgia that basically animates old still photos. So you could upload a photo of a long dead relative, press Deep Nostalgia, and then you will see your relative's eyes start blinking and them moving their heads, tilting, looking away from the camera and at the camera. And it's kind of an eerie sensation to watch this. And also, a little bit creepy, I thought. And as I reflected on this, it occurred to me that deep nostalgia is probably some kind of benign cousin to deep fake. So I put the question to you, Mark. What is deep fake technology, and should we be worried about it?
So what I found are deepfakes, just to define the term, are synthetic media in which techniques from artificial intelligence and more specifically machine learning are used to digitally replace one person's likeness with that of another. And the term originated with a Reddit user who in 2017 started uploading fake videos. His username was Deepfakes because he was drawing on an AI technique known as deep learning, which he was using to create pornographic videos featuring the likenesses of popular actresses. So deep learning plus fake equals deepfakes.
And of course, the pioneering thing was pornography.
As is often the case with internet technology or digital technology, the first application is porn. It's a sad truth.
Right.
And there was, for a time, an entire subreddit dedicated exclusively to deepfakes. It has since been deleted, and we'll hear more about that later, but that anonymous programmer's legacy lives on today. So the term deepfake is only about 4 years old, but the underlying research goes back quite a bit further. For instance, a program that was published in 1997 called Video Rewrite was able to take video footage of someone speaking and modify it so the person appeared to be speaking the words contained in a different audio track. It was based on machine learning that drew connections between sounds in a video vocal track and the shapes a person's face takes when making those sounds. And subsequent research has focused on refining the output. And you'll have to excuse me here. What follows is one humanity major's description of AI research. I did my best to figure out how this all works, but it gets very technical very quickly, and I can only hope that I'm in the right ballpark.
All right, go for it.
So generally simplified, machine learning is an AI process that uses training material, a very large amount of material, from which a computer can build a model of something. For instance, if you were trying to develop a system that could identify pictures of cats, you would feed your AI thousands and thousands of pictures of different cats, big cats, little cats, cats that climb on rocks. And it would analyze the digital components of those photos, the pixels, the colors, and which elements tend to appear together to create a mathematical model of what a cat photo looks like. You could then show your system another photo, and it would compare its model to this new photo and tell you whether it thinks it's a picture of a cat. In the case of deepfakes, you have two components, an encoder and a decoder. Let's say that you want to create a satirical video in which Nicolas Cage stars in a bunch of movies that he did not actually appear in. You would feed the encoder a whole lot of photos of Nicolas Cage's face, and the software breaks down these photos into what is called a, quote, lower dimensional latent space, unquote, which is essentially a mathematical description of what makes Nick Cage look like Nick Cage. You would also train your system on photos of a bunch of different human faces from different angles with different lighting until it is able to identify which part of the frame is the face and which part is not. Then the decoder goes through your destination material, for instance, a scene from Jaws or maybe Gone with the Wind, and inserts Nicolas Cage's face into the scene with all the original color and lighting, and with Cage's face performing the same movements and mouthing the same words as the original performer. If you wanted to sound like Nick Cage, you could have a celebrity impersonator re-record the dialogue, or even record different dialogue entirely, and the software will match the movements of Cage's mouth to the sounds on your new audio track. Those first deepfakes on Reddit focus just on swapping faces, but current research is focusing on swapping out entire bodies.
What you've described thus far sounds very entertaining and clever, but I'm grasping at what is the practical application of this new scientific technology. I mean, surely it wasn't developed just so somebody could put Nicolas Cage into classic movies. I mean, what's the useful appeation of
I think
this?
you underestimate the human need to see Nicolas Cage appear in many different movies that he didn't star in. But we will definitely
Perhaps.
be getting there. It started as an intellectual endeavor on the part of AI researchers, but there are many practical applications which we will be swinging around to later. So hang tight.
Okay.
Over the first few years, deepfakes are pretty easy to spot. You might see a video subject's face lit from one direction while their body was lit from a different direction. Or the timing might be off, which causes the video to flicker or jitter. Sometimes flashes of the original video subject would show through. And if part of the subject's face was obscured, for instance by hair or their hand, the software didn't know how to compensate, and you'd get weird artifacts on screen. The software improved very rapidly, though, and those flaws are getting harder to spot. A recent development in deep learning, for instance, is something called a generative adversarial network. And in this setup, you have a data set, for instance, our collection of Nick Cage photos, and then you have a generator charged with creating new photos based on that data set that, on the pixel level, are mathematically similar to the real images. Then you have what's called a discriminator, a separate part of the machine learning system that is given a set of photos, some real and some fake, and charged with guessing which is which. The two work against one another again and again, the generator trying to learn from its failures to make better fakes, and the discriminator learning from the ones it got wrong to get better at spotting the forgeries. The goal is for the discriminator's success rate to fall to 50%. When the discriminator's judgment is no better than a random guess, your generator is probably producing fakes that are nearly as good as the original. This obviously can take a lot of time and computing power, and right now generative adversarial networks do have trouble with convincing videos, but it can lead to very powerful systems and more convincing fakes once the software is good enough. Altering photos and video is not new, of course. The history of that sort of thing goes back pretty much to the beginnings of photos and video. Joseph Stalin, for instance, was notorious for ordering historical photos to be altered. His former allies turned opponents, some of whom were imprisoned and executed, were literally painted out of photos and effectively erased from history.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I remember hearing a story that in the early 1970s, Mao Zedong hadn't been seen in public for quite a while, and there were rumors that he was on his deathbed or maybe even already deceased. So to keep things calm, the authorities released a photo of him swimming in a river, only the photo had quite obviously been doctored, where they took his head from one photo and posed it on a photo of the water. So that one didn't go over so well. But the point is that people have been modifying photos for a very long time now. And meanwhile, in Hollywood, some actors have appeared in movies they were not actually in. Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford have both been digitally inserted as younger versions of themselves into recent Star Wars movies, for instance.
Yes.
In the upcoming movie, Army of the Dead, comedian Tig Notaro will appear, but she was not part of the original cast. Her scenes were shot and inserted into the film after the fact to replace a different comedian who had been accused by several women of sexual misconduct after the movie was shot. Because of pandemic restrictions, they decided to shoot Notaro's scenes on green screen with an acting partner rather than bringing the full cast back together.
Wow.
And then there's Paul Walker, who died in a car crash before Fast and Furious 7 was filmed. He was added to some scenes in that movie, drawing on footage they already had of him from previous films in the franchise. And then, of course, there's Photoshop, which has been helping photographers alter their photos for generations now. But previously, it took a lot of skill and often a lot of money to create a convincing fake. So the field was effectively limited to professionals, talented artists, and government employees. What's new and different now is powerful tools are becoming available to absolutely everybody.
Now, I did wonder whether Photoshop was the still photographic precursor to deepfake videos, so it sounds like it was.
It would not be considered a technical deepfake because at least current versions of Photoshop do not include, to my knowledge, a machine learning level that assists you in the fake, but maybe I just don't know enough about Photoshop and that it is in fact a direct precursor. But swinging back around to your earlier question, there are major industries that are very excited about this technology. For instance, in the marketing arena, there's a Japanese company working on deepfake software that can show you wearing various articles of clothing so you can virtually try something on before you buy. And Hollywood, of course, is very excited at the prospect of finding new and powerful ways to insert characters into scenes. I could see a day when, because of deepfakes, a big action movie might be put together kind of like an animated movie is today. Crews would still go out on location to shoot scenes, with stuntmen and women doing the physical and skill-based work, fight scenes, car chases, and that sort of thing. And then your big star, so let's say Tom Cruise, comes into the studio for a week or so, records his lines in a sound studio, and maybe gets photographed in different costumes. Finally, the digital team would get to work, inserting the star into the movie, seamlessly replacing the stunt performer with the image of the Hollywood actor. And if there's a line that doesn't quite work, which often happens in the editing bay once everything's already been shot, instead of going back out for reshoots, you would just have the actors record new dialogue, and you could have your on-screen digital avatars deliver these new lines without reshooting the entire scene. So Hollywood would have a lot of application for this.
It's funny you picked Tom Cruise of all people because he's known as a macho man actor and loves to do his own stunts. So I'm sure he'd be extremely pissed off if this is the future of action movies.
Yeah, it's fair to say that Tom Cruise is probably the last action star who would sign a contract where he would be deep-faked into an action scene because he takes it as a point of pride to do all of that himself.
Right.
There's also tons of potential for localizing videos for different markets. In 2020, for instance, an Indian politician used deepfake software to distribute a campaign advertisement that had been altered from its English original into a Haryanvi language version that targeted speakers of that language. An actor provided the Haryanvi language track, and the software lip-synced the video of the politician to the new audio track. Then in 2021, ESPN somewhat controversially released a documentary in which digital reconstructions of Al Davis and Pete Rozelle appeared in speaking roles. And there's a high-quality deepfake from 2019, which you can find at moondisaster.org, that appears to show President Nixon delivering a speech eulogizing astronauts who died during the first moon landing. In fact, that speech was written for Nixon but never delivered. That one step for man, one giant leap for mankind went off pretty much flawlessly. And so the video is a complete fake. The audio was recorded by another man mimicking Nixon's voice, but it is completely convincing and well worth a watch.
Wow, I'd love to see that or hear that. I hope you'll link to that in our Facebook sources.
Absolutely. Then there's corporate videos, and anyone who works in a big business like I do knows there are lots of training videos, and they're constantly being updated. Instead of shooting brand new videos, they could just update an old video with a new voice track, and multinationals could easily localize their videos for offices in foreign markets. Then there are other positive uses that are pretty much fall under the heading of things that people like you and me might produce, and a lot of them are for humor or entertainment purposes. These are the deepfakes that you'll generally find on YouTube. There's a pretty uncanny video on YouTube of an interview with comedian Bill Hader on Conan O'Brien. Hader's known as doing some great celebrity impressions, and he did some impressions during that interview. And someone took footage of that interview and morphed his face to match whichever celebrity he was impersonating during that segment. So when he's doing a Tom Cruise impression, he morphs into Tom Cruise, and it is startling to see.
Now, you've been mentioning all these things and characterizing them as positive, but it kind of raises, for me, a philosophical question. Are these things, like the Nixon thing you mentioned, are they really positive if they're faking reality? You know, especially in the climate we live in today, where so many people are gullible and liable to be persuaded by alternative facts and big lies and etc. I just wonder whether any of this fakery, even for artistic purposes, can truly be considered positive. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's a fair question, particularly if you are putting words into the mouth of someone who's deceased. Obviously, Richard Nixon did not sign off on his likeness being used in that video. So there is an ethical question, particularly if you're dealing with, for instance, like if Hollywood decides to shoot a new movie with Fred Astaire, for instance. Who gets to sign off on that? What are the ethics surrounding that? And what might be the collateral damage?
Yeah, I admit there's a host of legal / permission type questions, but I was thinking of a more basic philosophical issue of, we're just inundated with fake this, fake that, fakery everywhere. Do we really need to now develop an industry of deep fakes that are just perpetuating this misunderstanding of reality that we exist in right now?
Well, definitely be coming back to that one later, but I will say that no, we definitely do not need to be developing this industry, but this industry is definitely developing whether we need it or not.
Yeah, so the horse is out of the proverbial barn.
Yeah. So within other applications, there's the example you mentioned at the top of this episode of taking old photos and animating them, which we've both experienced to be about equal parts fascinating and creepy. And I ran across one prediction in which these digital reconstructions will someday include audio as well. So not only will the photo of your dead grandmother move around and smile at you, but you'll be able to ask her questions, and the AI will compose a response delivered in a digital approximation of her voice.
Wow.
Which would presumably be based on audio recordings from before she died. Whether or not you find that prospect exciting or horrifying is probably a matter of taste.
This sounds like a Black Mirror episode. In fact, I think I saw an episode that was similar to that.
It's very similar, actually, to a feature from the Harry Potter universe, where magical paintings would be animated, and like your dead parents would smile and wave at you from their painting. So the technology also within the positive framework provides a means for concealing the identity of vulnerable subjects. There's one documentary, for instance, out of Russia on LGBTQ people, and it is illegal to be gay in Russia. So the subjects could be imprisoned or even tortured if their identities got out. And so the filmmakers had a quandary, like how do they include these subjects in their testimony in a film if doing so would put them in danger. And what they did is they used deepfake avatars on screen that were based on LGBTQ volunteers from other parts of the world. So the words, the emotions of their subjects were maintained, but their likenesses was changed by software. And on a similar level, one company is working on what they call voice skins for use in online games and social platforms. And these would be artificially generated voices that would take the place of your voice in real time. So your words and volume, for instance, would be maintained, but you would sound like someone else. And this would allow female gamers, for instance, to use male voices to avoid in-game sexual harassment, or transgender players could use voices that align with their identity. Meanwhile, on this podcast, my dream is to one day sound just like Morgan Freeman. As you know, Joe, I get a lot of feedback about my voice. Lots of people have opinions on it, and all my life, people have been offering tips on what I should do to sound more like they think that I should. And I feel like everyone loves Morgan Freeman's voice. So I went looking for an online Morgan Freeman voice generator. Sadly, I came up empty, but I did find a James Earl Jones voice generator, and I got mixed results.
Old and Mansplaining, a podcast about the interesting things and unexpected discoveries you can make if you just take the time to learn. I'm Mark, your host this week. And as always, I am joined by Joe, an old friend from college. Together, We'll explore what's on our minds and hopefully figure out a thing or two about a thing or two.
You certainly do sound like Darth Vader with the breathing, but I detected a note of Arnold Schwarzenegger in there too, because it sounds like a bit of a foreign accent.
To me, it sounds like Darth Vader with a bad case of emphysema. So clearly the technology isn't quite there yet, but it probably won't be long before the results are quite a bit better. And maybe someday you will tune into this podcast and enjoy the dulcet tones of Morgan Freeman.
Get busy living or get busy dying.
But despite these positive uses, there are obvious reasons for concern. Most experts think deepfakes need another 2 to 10 years to become really convincing, and then we'll have a variety of unhappy scenarios to contemplate. And first off, there's the old problem of non-consensual pornography. This was the very first use of the deepfake technology back on Reddit, and it's only proliferated since then. A study from 2019 found that 96% of deepfakes were pornographic in nature, and generally involved inserting the likenesses of English or American actresses into porn scenes. Most social networks, including Reddit, and even the porn sites themselves have policies prohibiting this type of content, but users continue to upload it.
I bet it's used for fake revenge porn as well.
Yeah, I was going to say revenge porn is another area of concern. If a man is out to humiliate an ex-wife or girlfriend, these tools would allow him to create compromising photos or video for using nothing more than the photos he has on his phone or that she's uploaded to social media. Then there's the scenario of political propaganda and election interference. A Belgian political action group released a video of the Belgian Prime Minister giving a speech that linked COVID-19 to environmental damage and called for drastic action on climate change. It was a deep fake, and it was labeled as such, but some viewers still believed that it was real. And after what we've already gone through, it seems pretty likely that Russian, North Korean, Chinese, and maybe even Iranian teams are hard at work on their deepfake skills right now, getting ready to unleash fake photos and video on American social media. And that's not even counting the groups on American soil who would leap at the chance to use fake videos to create outrage and opposition to a political candidate or a social movement.
Sure, yeah.
You might remember the video of a speech Nancy Pelosi gave, which had been altered to make it seem like she was drunk and slurring her speech.
Yes.
This was not actually a deep fake. It had just been slowed down, and AI wasn't involved in producing it, but it gives you a taste of the sort of thing we could see.
Of course, and we will see this, probably for the very next political campaign.
Sure. Well, there were actually fears that we would be seeing deepfake videos disrupting the 2020 election, and it seems like we dodged that bullet, but by 2024, it could definitely be part of the landscape.
With plausible deniability by the guilty parties.
Sure. Then there's the case of fraud. In 2019, a UK energy firm CEO was allegedly scammed over the phone by someone using deepfake software to impersonate the voice of the firm's parent company's CEO and ordered him to transfer 220,000 euros into a Hungarian bank account, which he did. But then when the caller called back to ask for more money, he got suspicious and launched an investigation. The next time you get a phone call from your wife, Joe, and she's saying, I need $5,000 desperately, wire it to me, you maybe should set up some sort of passcode that the two of you should exchange to verify your identity.
Safe word. Yeah.
Then for blackmail, you could generate fake video of a husband cheating on his wife and then threaten to release it unless he pays up. And in general, the risk of deepfakes is that seeing is no longer believing. There's an erosion of truth in the context of material like this.
Yes, right.
It offers plausible deniability even to people who are guilty of what a video shows them saying or doing. Some researchers talk of something that they call the liar's dividend, which is that the existence of deepfakes provides cover for anyone to do whatever they want, since they can plausibly deny any and all evidence as a deepfake. And we've already seen 2 examples of this playing out in the real world. In 2018, video surfaced of a Brazilian politician participating in an orgy. He insisted it was a fake. And a politician in Malaysia used the same excuse when a video of a gay man surfaced, claiming the two of them had sex. His staff members asserted that the video had been doctored. No one has been able to definitively prove whether either of these videos is real or a fake, and so public opinion remained divided.
I also read something recently about deepfake technology being used in the realm of medical imagery. I read about some researchers who took like CT scan images of a lung, say, and added signs of lung cancer to the scan, or removed signs of lung cancer from a scan that truly was showing lung cancer, and then showed those images to radiologists who were fooled and didn't realize that they were fakes. I think that's pretty scary.
Yeah. It is. I read about that as well. Did not include it here because my gut level feeling is we will see less examples of that sort of thing than the other examples I cited, but it's definitely a risk.
In the way of, malevolent fraudsters. That's what made me think of this.
Sure, yeah. Now, so there are attempts to protect us all against the misuse of deepfakes. There's research going into detection tools, much of it financed by DARPA, Google, and Facebook. And many of the researchers are hoping to reverse engineer the deepfake software to look for telltale signature signs left behind in the videos. Other researchers are focusing on things like the reflection of light in the eyes of the people depicted, or developing a, quote, soft biometric signature, unquote, of significant figures like political operators, which would be their characteristic style, speech, and body movement to make it easier to spot when video of them had been faked. And there are already 2 consumer products that act like spam filters and promise to divert fake video into a quarantine zone on your computer before you see it. I would say, though, that these products are likely to be just about as effective as network security is today. Which is to say, as soon as you develop a new way of detecting fakes, the other side will modify their tools to compensate and close that hole.
Yes.
For instance, there's a specific example of this. A researcher went to a conference and gave a talk about how you could detect a deepfaked video by looking at the rate at which the video subject blinked. And just a few days later, a deepfake figure emailed him saying, "Thank you for the tip. We've revised our software to remove that error." So it's really a game of whack-a-mole. The protectors find a way to detect the videos, and then the creators of the videos use that as an impetus to change that part of their tools. And it goes on and on forever.
Which is the case with all crime, if you think about it.
Yeah. Some people have the idea that we should insert digital watermarks into media. Something would be embedded in the photo or video that identified its source, such as using blockchain to verify the video source. And the idea is that you would have some sort of policy by which a social media network would not display a video until it had been verified through blockchain. I have to say, just immediately, this seems wildly impractical to me because right off the bat, it's going to shut down YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, since all of those are based on sharing media from regular users rather than trusted sources. And it's hard to imagine those networks going along with this plan.
Right.
And even if you do get digital watermarks just automatically built into everyone who's producing phones or video tools, that would almost immediately be misused by law enforcement or repressive regimes who are looking to track down dissidents by looking at the watermark in the photos or video that they share.
Right.
So I'm not excited about this particular way. Other people are trying to drum up crowdsourced reporting tools where if a deepfaked video shows up online, then you can flag it. And I feel like that's almost certainly going to be too slow. Both Twitter and Facebook have announced that they will label altered video as fake, but neither one of them has announced that they'll be taking it down. I was not able to find a YouTube policy, so maybe they don't have one yet. And so none of these efforts really inspire confidence. I'm no expert in this field, but I look at these countermeasures and it seems clear to me that they are simply not going to work.
What about legislation, though? Is there anything that Congress or state legislatures can address? Because I'm thinking this is a form of identity theft, and there are laws against identity theft. Can they perhaps be broadened to include this new wave of deep fakery?
Certainly. And in fact, there are laws against revenge porn already, so you could certainly apply it to that. I think the problem there, though, is so many of these actors are simply not easily identifiable. Some of them are foreign nationals. So, there's a question of jurisdiction and whose laws apply.
Right.
Others are like using throwaway accounts to quickly post content and then delete that account and pop up somewhere else. It's awfully easy to hide from this sort of thing. So it's kind of like hackers.
Right.
There are laws against what hackers do. Some of them do get caught and sent to jail. And yet hacking proliferates because it's still, for the most part, a pretty decent way for a certain type of person to make money. So I think we would see the same community of people who are willing to do it, even though it is illegal.
Yeah, that's probably true. I was also thinking about the pirated DVD made in China of your new Hollywood film. Good luck figuring out who's responsible for that.
Or even not pirated DVDs, torrents of movies, which show up the same day that the movie shows up on streaming. And that also is illegal. You can be fined a great deal of money or sent to prison for sharing that sort of thing. And yet people openly, brazenly do it every single day. So what do I think our future will look like? I think that fake photos, video, and even audio will become both more common and more difficult to distinguish from the real thing. When incriminating video surfaces of someone, I think it will become routine to claim that it's fake, whether or not it actually is. And in a way, we already got a taste of this during the Trump administration, when anything that ran contrary to the White House narrative was immediately branded as fake news, up to and including things that Trump himself had said on video.
Yes.
So if you really enjoyed that 4-year period in which we as a nation argued constantly about what was true and what was not, get ready to enjoy it even more.
I just had a really scary thought, Mark. Imagine Derek Chauvin's defense attorney saying that the video shot by the teenager on the street, it was a fake.
Yeah.
You only need to convince one paranoid conspiracy theory believing member of the jury that that's the case.
Right.
There are people who still think the moon landing was faked and that JFK was killed by the Cubans,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Or even to expand that, like at what point does video evidence become inadmissible in court because it can't be verified as accurate?
Yeah. Wow, that's profound ramifications we're talking about now.
So just as it was back when Trump was ruling over us all, it's going to be incumbent on every private citizen to decide what to accept as real and factual, which brings me to the topic of confirmation bias. Are you familiar with that term?
Yes, but say more about it.
Sure. Yeah, for those of our listeners who are unfamiliar, confirmation bias is a trait that every human being shares. We are much more likely to accept evidence that confirms what we already believe rather than accept that we are wrong and change our beliefs. If the evidence confirms our preconceptions, we take it at face value. If it challenges those beliefs, we question the source material or wonder about the motivations of the researchers. And we see this all the time already with global warming or the COVID-19 pandemic or really any contentious issue. If you show someone evidence that runs counter to their beliefs, their first reaction will be to throw out the evidence. And so my prediction is that deepfakes will serve to entrench us even deeper in what we already believe. Researcher Aviv Ovadia talks about what she calls reality apathy, in which we all reach a tipping point where it becomes too difficult to establish what's real and what's not. And so we just continue on believing what we already believe. And it's easy to point fingers at people on the other side of the ideological spectrum and say, that's what those guys will do. But I think it's important to understand that we will be doing it too. This applies to you, me, and every listener of this podcast. It will be difficult to determine the truth, and it will be easy and comfortable to assume that we already know what's true. And more times than not, we're going to go with what's easy and comfortable. Think back to that doctored Nancy Pelosi speech. I never saw that video because the moment I heard about it, my brain labeled it as fake news. I feel confident that my judgment was correct in that case, but it does make you wonder, how often have I made a similar snap judgment and been wrong? So I think there's only one way out of this hole we're digging for ourselves, not necessarily to question everything. You need to take some things as true. Being suspicious of everything is how conspiracy theories get made.
Yes.
But I do think it's important to be curious about everything. Read widely. Subscribe to podcasts like this one. Take in as many voices and as many different opinions as you can, including opinions of people who see the world differently than you do. Because if the best we can hope for is to be stuck in our preconceptions, the least we can do is make those preconceptions as broad as possible.
Unfortunately, I think your prediction is probably largely correct, given the screwed up state we're in right now of half the population not knowing how to distinguish fact from fiction already before deepfakes have become predominant. But I want to add one thing to what the future might look like. I think we need more media literacy and media education among the populace. And I suspect that is going to be something that happens in the future too. More of a focus on media literacy, starting in the grade school maybe. I work for a public broadcaster, and one of the things we do online is this nice little series called Take on Fake. They are like short online videos that debunk various popular conspiracy theories, etc. But more importantly than that, they show you the fact checkers and researchers and talk to them about how exactly they debunk these cockamamie crazy theories. I think it's a really instructive little series, and I may post the link to Take on Fake to our Facebook page as well with all your sources so people could take a look at that. But the point of bringing that up is I think we Americans need to be more critical consumers of media, and we need to be able to debunk false content ourselves, and have the tools to do that kind of thing.
I think you're right. It kind of reminds me of how when Wikipedia came out, schools started to include in education for their students sort of a critical approach to sources that might not have been quite as much a priority as before, because it's possible that students were relying on faulty data in assembling their materials. And so I think the proliferation of deepfakes will at the very least make it incumbent on everyone to take a harder look at what they take in and question who they trust and what they trust and how they know that stuff is true. And none of that will be easy. All of it will be necessary.
Right. And also on your point about Wikipedia, though you gave like the kind of negative undercurrent, there's also the positive thing about Wikipedia, crowdsourced history, I think of what's happening with the prosecution of the January 6th insurrectionists and how a lot of the prosecutions are based on crowdsourced work parsing through video by very technologically savvy videographers and fact checkers. And I think that is one way to combat misinformation and deepfakes, collectively. So I think there's some positive applications as well.
I agree. Totally agree. Though I did work at Britannica when Wikipedia came out. I don't know if you know that about me. We discussed Wikipedia at Britannica, and we judged it not to be a risk to our business. And we were wrong, because Britannica has now shut down its encyclopedia and is owned by an Israeli company, and Wikipedia is even bigger than before.
Right.
Because, like you say, when you have thousands of volunteer editors and tens of thousands of volunteer contributors, it creates possibilities that didn't exist before.
And many of those editors are themselves serious scholars who care about those entries and will purge the entries of any BS that other people add to it. So you could end up with a reliable thing.
Yeah, I hit Wikipedia all the time. I can't remember the last time I went to Britannica.com, even though I used to work for Britannica.com.
Right. Right.
So, did I answer your questions?
Yeah, I think you did. And apart from that scary transmutation of your voice into that of Darth Vader, you didn't scare me, especially in this episode, as like I thought you might. So, yeah, I guess it's a win-win today, Mark.
Okay, great. And are you ready for your question for next time?
Sure.
This episode's topic dealt with a lot of artificial intelligence, which is a fascinating topic for me. And in the next episode, I'd like us to consider a different application of that technology, namely military drones. The U.S. military, of course, already uses armed drones and has done so for many years. And the drones may use AI to navigate to a certain position or even select potential targets. But the decision to fire those weapons still comes down to a human being pulling the trigger. It seems inevitable, though, that eventually the AI will be given full responsibility for those decisions. If not by the U.S. military, some other country will take the plunge. So my question, how close are we to fully autonomous machines opening fire, either on human targets or on enemy machines? And how do you think the nature of warfare will change as a result?
Wow, that's interesting. You know, just this morning, I got a message about the use of drone technology in news gathering, strangely enough.
It's a convergence.
Drones are in the news right now. So yeah, sure, I will get on that and let you know what I discover.
Okay, cool. Look forward to hearing it.
If you like this episode of Mansplaining or want to leave a comment about this or any other episode of the podcast, please go to our Facebook page, our aforementioned Facebook page, which is titled Mansplaining the Podcast. You can even like us there, and I would encourage you to love us there. And I promise you that your love will not be unrequited. We welcome your feedback, positive or negative, including topic ideas for future episodes. That's all for this edition of Mansplaining. That was Mark, I'm Joe, and we'll talk to you next time.
Talk to you soon. That's it for this edition of Mansplaining. Mansplaining is brought to you by Joe and Mark and nobody else. Thank you for hanging out with us for a little bit, and we'll see you next time.